On the Mid-Autumn Festival, September 11th, 2003, while families across China were gathering together to celebrate this day of reunion, a man sat quietly in the waiting area outside an emergency room at a hospital in Suzhou City, Jiangsu Province. His face was filled with grief and worry. The man's name was Qiu Xiaoqiang. He sat there, his eyes fixed on the emergency room door, because inside that room, lying on a hospital bed in critical condition, was none other than his beloved wife. Her name was Gu Su. As soon as he heard that his daughter was in a dangerous condition and needed emergency treatment, Xiaoqiang's father-in-law, Mr. Gu Xirong, immediately dropped everything and rushed to the hospital as fast as he could. As a father, he had no time to sit and grieve or cry. Instead, drawing on the experience and connections he had accumulated throughout his medical career, he immediately contacted an old friend who was currently serving as the director of a major hospital in Suzhou, asking him to personally participate in his daughter's emergency treatment. However, despite the medical team's best efforts, working tirelessly for 2 full hours and applying every possible medical intervention, they still could not save Gu Su's life. The young woman had passed away forever. Before his retirement, Mr. Xirong had been one of the leading medical experts in the region, respected and admired throughout the medical community. Throughout his life dedicated to medicine, he had successfully treated countless patients, bringing joy and life to numerous families. But now, in a cruel twist of fate, he found himself standing there completely helpless, unable to do anything but watch his own flesh and blood daughter slowly slip away right before his eyes. The pain in this father's heart at that moment was truly beyond words. As for his son-in-law Xiaoqiang, he appeared to be suffering no less than his father-in-law. When he learned that his wife had died, he seemed to lose his soul, rushing over to collapse beside his wife's body, holding her tightly while crying inconsolably, his sobs echoing through the hospital corridors. In his extreme anguish, he even tried to bash his head against the wall to end his own life, as if he no longer wanted to live without his beloved wife. Fortunately, those around him managed to stop him in time. This heartbreaking scene deeply moved everyone present. They could all feel the deep bond between this young couple and couldn't help but feel sympathy for their tragic fate. Moreover, Xiaoqiang knelt down on the ground, crying while saying to his parents-in-law, "You entrusted Susu to me, but I failed to take good care of her. I'm sorry. From now on, I will be like your own son." Seeing his son-in-law's extreme grief, appearing to be on the verge of a complete breakdown, Mr. Gu Xirong felt deeply pained and sympathetic. Clearly, Xiaoqiang loved his daughter very much, and the pain of losing his wife had driven him nearly mad. However, alongside the grief of losing his daughter, something else was gnawing at Mr. Gu's mind. With the extensive experience he had accumulated over many years working in the medical field, he felt that his daughter's death was somehow unusual, suspicious, and not as simple as the hospital's initial conclusion suggested. From childhood to adulthood, Gu Su had always been a very healthy girl who rarely got sick or needed to visit the hospital. She had never had any serious health problems. However, everything began to change about 2 years ago. From that point on, she started frequently experiencing symptoms such as dizziness, blurred vision, chest tightness, and shortness of breath. Initially, these symptoms would appear briefly and then disappear, but over time, they became more frequent and gradually developed into characteristic signs of cardiovascular disease. Worried about her health, Gu Su regularly visited various medical facilities and underwent all kinds of tests and examinations. But strangely, doctors could not identify the root cause of these symptoms. When Mr. Gu rushed to the hospital and was allowed to see his daughter one last time with his professional eye as a medical expert, he carefully observed the condition of her body. He noticed that his daughter's pupils were fully dilated. Her entire body from head to toe had turned an abnormally blue-purple color. Her abdomen was swollen and distended, and notably, there were still traces of fluid and vomited food around her mouth. He was also informed by the doctors that the direct cause of his daughter's death was acute respiratory failure, followed by cardiac arrest. As someone with decades of experience in the medical field, Mr. Gu understood better than anyone that all these clinical signs did not match the symptoms of someone who had died from heart disease, as the hospital had initially concluded. On the contrary, these manifestations suspiciously matched the typical symptoms of a poisoning case. Serious doubts began to rise in his mind. Therefore, with the caution and clear-headedness of a scientist, Mr. Gu quietly and secretly collected and preserved a sample of his daughter's vomit without anyone knowing. He was determined to investigate further himself to find the truth behind this mysterious death. Around 3 a.m. on September 12th, while the atmosphere of mourning still hung over the hospital, Mr. Gu, filled with suspicions, decided he had to get to the truth. He quietly called Xiao Chang aside to a secluded corner for a private conversation. With a grave voice and stern eyes looking directly at his son-in-law, Mr. Gu spoke slowly. "We are both medical professionals who understand the human body and disease symptoms well. I need you to tell me the truth. From the time the family finished dinner until Su was brought to the hospital for emergency treatment, only the two of you were at home together, no one else. So how exactly did Su die? What happened during that time? You must tell me clearly." Faced with his father-in-law's direct questions and confrontation, Xiaoqiang immediately became extremely agitated and upset. He jumped to his feet, raised both hands to the sky as if calling on the gods to bear witness, and swore emphatically that he had absolutely done nothing wrong to Gu Su, that he loved his wife more than anything in the world and could never harm her. Seeing his son-in-law react so firmly and intensely, appearing to be genuinely wronged, Mr. Gu fell silent and didn't question him further. However, deep down, he still couldn't feel completely at ease. To clarify the real cause behind his daughter's sudden and mysterious death, Mr. Gu proactively proposed to the family and the hospital that a thorough autopsy be conducted. This decision immediately received agreement and support from most people present. However, strangely, when Xiaoqiang heard the proposal for an autopsy, he suddenly seemed to lose all his strength, his legs buckled, and he collapsed to the ground. Most notably, in his eyes at that moment, there was not only grief, but also an inexplicable fear. On the afternoon of September 13th, 2003, when the forensic doctors had prepared all their instruments and were ready to begin the autopsy as Mr. Gu had proposed, something unexpected happened. Xiao Chang suddenly burst into the examination room. To everyone's astonishment, he rushed over and fell to his knees before the forensic doctors, using his entire body to prevent them from performing the autopsy on his wife. He cried, begged, and pleaded with the doctors not to touch Gu Su's body. The scene was chaotic, with about 7 or 8 strong men crowding around trying to pull him away, but somehow they couldn't move him an inch. In his extreme agitation, Xiaoqiang even turned and pointed directly at his father-in-law's face, his voice full of anger and reproach. "She's already dead. How can you bear to cut open your own daughter like this? Don't you feel sorry for her? How can you be so heartless?" Some relatives present, seeing how tense the situation had become, tried to calm Xiaoqiang down with gentle and reasonable words. They explained that the autopsy would actually be good for him too, because if anyone ever raised questions or doubts about Gu Su's death in the future, the autopsy results would be the clearest evidence to prove his innocence and help clarify everything transparently and fairly. However, what surprised everyone was that when Xiao Qiang heard these well-meaning words of advice, instead of calming down, he became even more angry and agitated. His abnormal reaction caused many people present to start feeling suspicious and questioning in their minds. In such a chaotic and tense situation, the autopsy was delayed and interrupted for many hours. It wasn't until 6 p.m. that day, when everyone finally managed to convince Xiao Qiang to calm down and leave the examination room, that the forensic doctors could begin their work. They worked meticulously and carefully, not missing any detail, and the results were quickly produced shortly afterward. On September 14th, 2003, when Mr. Gu and other family members received the official autopsy report for Gu Su, everyone felt as if they had been struck by lightning, horrified and unable to believe what they were reading. The report clearly indicated that in the remaining vomit sample from Gu Su, throughout her entire digestive tract from stomach to intestines, and especially in her blood, there was an astonishingly large amount of the anesthetic ketamine. Ketamine is a short-acting anesthetic that is colorless, odorless, and dissolves easily in water. In medicine, it is commonly used in minor surgeries or diagnostic procedures. However, if a person ingests this anesthetic, it puts severe stress on the heart. Particularly when it reaches a certain dosage, it causes respiratory depression leading to heart failure and ultimately death. This type of anesthetic is a prescription drug that cannot be purchased at regular pharmacies. Only medical professionals have access to it. After learning the cause of his daughter's death, Mr. Gu immediately called the police. When they understood the situation, the police also realized that this case was not as simple as it appeared on the surface. Therefore, they quickly launched an investigation. According to what the police discovered, Gu Su had been a girl with a very cheerful, lively, and optimistic personality. At her workplace, she was always well-liked and had excellent relationships with all her colleagues. Her daily mood was also very stable, with no signs that she was experiencing psychological problems or under any mental stress. When Gu Su's colleagues were interviewed, they said that just 2 days before the Mid-Autumn Festival, Gu Su had cheerfully asked her husband Xiao Qiang to bring medicine to another colleague who was sick. When the couple met at the office that day, they looked very affectionate and happy together, making many people envious. Gu Su had even excitedly shared with colleagues about the family's plans for this year's holiday, saying that instead of giving mooncakes to her parents-in-law as in previous years, the couple had decided to give them red envelopes directly, which would be more convenient and practical. She spoke about her future plans with eager and joyful eyes. All these details showed that Gu Su was living a normal, happy life and had absolutely no intention or thought of ending her own life. Therefore, after careful consideration, the police officially ruled out the possibility that Gu Su had committed suicide. Continuing to dig deeper into the investigation, the police examined all the medication records at the hospital where Gu Su had been brought for emergency treatment, and also directly interviewed the attending physician responsible for her case. Through careful verification and cross-referencing of medical documents, they confirmed that throughout the entire emergency treatment process at the hospital that day, Gu Su had not been given any ketamine anesthetic whatsoever. This finding helped the police rule out the possibility that the hospital might have accidentally given Gu Su an overdose, leading to her death. After successively eliminating both the possibilities of suicide and medical error, the police were left with only one conclusion that could explain the presence of large amounts of ketamine in the victim's body. Gu Su had been deliberately poisoned and murdered. And when considering who had the easiest access to the anesthetic ketamine, as well as the opportunity to secretly give it to Gu Su in her daily life without being detected, the most suspicious person was none other than her husband, Xiao Qiang. Combined with Xiao Qiang's highly abnormal behavior throughout the autopsy process, the police decided to conduct a thorough investigation of this husband. And sure enough, not long after, they found crucial evidence. First was Xiao Qiang's signature in the hospital's drug dispensing log, clearly documenting that he had taken ketamine anesthetic. Additionally, the police found the empty medicine vial that he had thrown in the trash after poisoning his wife. After compiling and connecting all the evidence they had collected, on the evening of September 23, 2003, the Hukyu District Police formally arrested Xiao Qiang. When the police arrived, Xiao Qiang was completely unaware. He still thought that his wife's body had been cremated long ago and all evidence had been destroyed, so he had nothing to worry about. In fact, at the moment of his arrest, he was casually staying at his mistress's house as if nothing had happened. At the police station, Xiao Qiang initially tried to remain silent, refusing to admit to anything. However, after 12 hours facing clear and undeniable evidence, he finally had to bow his head and admit the truth. He was the one who had poisoned his wife, directly causing Gu Su's death. Faced with this cruel truth, Mr. Sirong felt extreme anguish and blamed himself, saying, "It's all my fault. If it weren't for me, my daughter wouldn't have died. So why would Xiao Qiang poison his own wife?" Xiao Qiang was born in 1969 in Pingjiang District, Suzhou City, China. From a young age, his family's circumstances had been very poor, and daily life was a constant struggle with material hardships. Growing up in such a deprived environment shaped Xiaochang's distinctive personality. He became an extremely competitive person, always having an intense desire to surpass others in every field. Whether in academics or any other aspect of life, he set very high standards for himself and refused to be inferior to anyone. In 1987, through his relentless efforts, Xiaochang was admitted to Suzhou Medical University with excellent grades. However, this good news was not supported by his family. His parents felt that pursuing a career in medicine was extremely difficult and demanding, requiring many years of study and expensive costs, while the family couldn't afford it. They advised him to choose a more practical path, but Xiaochang remained absolutely firm in his decision. For him, becoming a doctor was not merely a predetermined career goal, but a dream he had cherished since childhood. Moreover, with his competitive nature, the more his family opposed him, the more determined he became to succeed in order to prove to everyone that his choice was correct. Throughout his university years, Xiaochang not only studied diligently, immersing himself in books and lectures, but also actively participated in various extracurricular activities and school programs. Thanks to his enthusiasm and progressive attitude, he was always highly regarded by his professors and well-liked by his peers. After graduating from university with excellent results in 1992, Xiaochang was assigned to intern at the Pingjiang District People's Hospital. This job was envied by many at the time because even though he was just an intern, as long as he persevered and worked hard, becoming a full-fledged doctor would only be a matter of time. However, this seemingly enviable path did not satisfy Xiaochang. He didn't want to spend too much time and effort just to eventually obtain a position as a regular doctor at the hospital. Instead, he decided to pursue further education to create other opportunities for himself. Subsequently, Xiaochang applied for graduate school at his alma mater. His academic abilities were undeniably outstanding, as just over a year later, he passed the entrance exam for the master's program. It was precisely because of this that Xiaochang met the benefactor of his life, his graduate advisor, a man named Gu Xirong. At that time, Mr. Xirong was the head of the thoracic surgery department at the second hospital of Suzhou Medical University, a renowned local medical expert, and also a former standing committee member of the Suzhou Municipal People's Congress. For Xiaochang to become his student was truly a fortunate opportunity. Afterward, Xiaochang maintained his excellent academic performance, just as during his undergraduate years. He was also a student union officer and a party member. Therefore, Mr. Xirong highly valued this talented young man. Xiaochang clearly understood that his professor's recognition could completely change his fate. So he frequently took the initiative to help the professor with small tasks like buying groceries, changing gas tanks, and other errands to get closer to his mentor. But even Xiaochang didn't expect that the professor would want to introduce him to his daughter. In the eyes of outsiders, Mr. Xirong was a man with a successful career and a happy life. But every family has its own difficulties, and he also had something that constantly worried him and made him frown whenever he thought about it. It turned out that he had two daughters, Gu Su and Gu Jing, but neither of them wanted to study medicine. When he thought about how he had spent his entire life in the medical profession, but would have no one to carry on his legacy after he passed away, he felt deeply regretful. However, compared to this matter, what worried him even more was the marriage situation of his eldest daughter, Gu Su. After graduating from college, Gu Su became an accountant at a construction inspection station. She had a somewhat introverted personality and didn't like wearing makeup, so even though she was nearly 26 years old, she still hadn't found a suitable partner to date, let alone get married and have children. As time passed, the aging father became increasingly worried about this. Xiaochang's appearance gave him new hope. A talented young man like Xiaochang, with excellent academic achievements, good social skills, and a passion for medicine. Such a person was hard to find. If he could become his son-in-law, not only would his daughter marry a good husband, but his career would also have a successor. It would be killing two birds with one stone. Therefore, Xirong asked about Xiaochang's romantic situation. If he already had a girlfriend, then the matter would have to be dropped. But after some hesitation, Xiaochang stammered to his professor that he didn't have a girlfriend yet. So Mr. Gu began his intention to matchmake his daughter Gu Su with his student. What surprised him was that Gu Su and Xiao Qiang seemed to have feelings for each other. Not long after meeting, they began dating. By 1997, before friends and family as witnesses, they walked down the aisle together. At the wedding, Xiao Qiang promised his father-in-law that he would take good care of his daughter. Seeing the young couple he had match-made so full of happiness, Mr. Gu was also very pleased. After Xiao Qiang completed his master's degree, thanks to his father-in-law's connections, he was able to work at the Suzhou Children's Hospital. Here, both the benefits and opportunities for advancement were much better than at the district hospital where he had worked before. In fact, Xiao Qiang was also very accomplished in his professional field. The Suzhou Evening News on October 8, 2003, reported on a successful laparoscopic surgery for a baby boy with congenital biliary atresia at Suzhou Children's Hospital. This was the first such surgery in China, and the baby who needed the operation was only 2 months old. The lead surgeon for this case was none other than Xiao Qiang. This shows that his medical skills were indeed exceptional. 4 years after getting married, Gu Su gave birth to a baby girl. In the eyes of many, Xiao Qiang was a winner in life. He had married the professor's daughter, had a happy and harmonious family, a thriving career, and a bright future ahead. However, in the eyes of Xiao Qiang's parents, things were not so rosy. They always felt that the marriage between their son and Gu Su was a mistake. In the autumn of 1997, while working at a technical station in Hotan, Xinjiang, Xiao Qiang's father suddenly received a letter from his son. In the letter, he hoped his parents would come back to attend his wedding with Gu Su. This confused his father greatly because his son's girlfriend wasn't named Gu Su. It turned out that before dating Gu Su, Xiao Qiang already had a girlfriend who was an elementary school teacher. The two had deep feelings for each other and had even discussed marriage. But because he wanted to gain the professor's support and advance his career quickly in the future, Xiao Qiang decided to break up with his girlfriend of many years. At the wedding, Xiao Qiang's parents met Gu Su for the first time. They were not pleased with their daughter-in-law because their son's former girlfriend was tall and beautiful, while Gu Su had an ordinary appearance and was quite short. Xiao Qiang was someone who maintained a very good image in public, and many people had a favorable impression of him. It was said that during his university days, when a classmate suddenly came down with a high fever, he immediately carried his friend on his back and ran all the way to the hospital, not caring that he was drenched in sweat. At Suzhou Children's Hospital, Xiao Qiang was also highly regarded by many patients' families, who felt he had excellent skills but a very humble personality. Whenever Gu Su's colleagues had health issues, they would seek out Xiao Qiang for help, and he would proactively bring them medicine. Therefore, everyone had a very good impression of him. A colleague who had worked with Gu Su for 8 years always thought the couple was a perfect match. The husband had a successful career and liked helping others. Meanwhile, Gu Su had just been promoted to department head that July. Not only that, Xiao Qiang's personality was gentle, humble, and he never initiated arguments with anyone. 2 days before the Mid-Autumn Festival, Xiao Qiang came again to bring medicine to one of Gu Su's colleagues. It happened that another colleague had just returned from a business trip with local specialties, so everyone gathered to enjoy them together. Gu Su playfully said to her husband, "Feed me." Xiao Qiang laughed and replied, "I've already fed you before. You're still like a child." This scene made everyone around feel how sweet they were together. Colleagues all said that if the workplace held a vote for the model couple or the 5 Good Families award, they would definitely choose Xiao Qiang's family. But all of this was just a mask that Xiao Qiang wore in front of others. Xiao Qiang and Gu Su didn't actually love each other as everyone saw. It could even be said that they were husband and wife in name only, without any real marital affection. Because from the very beginning, Xiao Qiang never loved Gu Su. He married her only for the benefits her family could provide. Xiao Qiang clearly understood that his career could develop so quickly entirely thanks to his father-in-law's support. Not long after the two got married, in late 1997, Xiao Qiang's parents' home was demolished. Having nowhere to live, they hoped to stay temporarily at their son's place until their new home was built. But in the end, they had to live in the basement of their son's new house for 10 full months. Xiao Qiang's mother believed this wasn't her son's fault, but because her daughter-in-law didn't agree. She said the house had been allocated by Gu Su's workplace. However, Xiao Chang's parents also admitted that after having a child, their daughter-in-law treated them better. Xiao Chang's mother thought it was because the grandparents had worked hard to take care of their granddaughter for their daughter-in-law. But Gu Su's colleagues felt she treated her parents-in-law even better than her own parents. Every day after work, she would go a long way to her in-laws' house for dinner. She was usually very generous with them. For the Mid-Autumn Festival, she had even prepared a red envelope of 600 yuan, about $85, specifically for them. However, Xiao Chang's father explained that this money was mainly for food expenses. They would specially prepare dishes that their daughter-in-law liked. As for themselves, they ate very simply, sometimes just eating leftovers. On the other hand, Xiao Chang's family always felt that Gu Su's family looked down on their working-class background. His father gave an example. A week after Xiao Chang's wedding, his older brother also held his wedding. Because they chose a slightly nicer hotel, the Gu family made a huge fuss and refused to attend the wedding. From this, we can see that in this marriage, Xiao Chang always felt he was accommodating his wife and her family. At first, he might not have felt anything, but over time, the resentment grew deeper. Additionally, with his competitive personality, he couldn't feel the admiration he craved from Gu Su. Therefore, their marital relationship became increasingly tense. They were just playing the role of an affectionate couple in front of others. This was also confirmed by those close to them. A close friend of the couple recounted, "During the day, they both went to work. In the evening, they went to the in-laws' house for dinner and to take care of their daughter. When they got home, Gu Su watched TV and texted friends, while Xiao Chang went online or prepared coursework for his doctoral studies. The couple felt they had nothing to talk about, so their married life just passed by tediously." A close friend of Gu Su thought both of them were too concerned with appearances. Even when there were conflicts between them, they wouldn't speak up. They even waited for the other person to bring up divorce first. Because Gu Su had once told this friend, if Xiao Chang proposed divorce, she would definitely agree. However, Gu Su's close friend also mentioned that because Gu Su felt her education level wasn't high, while Xiao Chang was a master's degree holder, she always felt somewhat inferior. Therefore, Gu Su was very accommodating to her husband. Moreover, she was very good to Xiao Chang. For instance, when her husband started losing his hair, Gu Su researched folk remedies and special medicines everywhere, even asking someone to buy them from Shanghai. Unfortunately, Xiao Chang was not at all moved by these actions from Gu Su. Outwardly, he appeared to be a loving husband, but in reality, he had long betrayed his wife. Furthermore, he was a true womanizer, carrying on not just with one or two people, but countless extramarital relationships. Xiao Chang was famous as a talented young man, so there were many young, beautiful nurses surrounding him. In 2000, Xiao Chang noticed a beautiful nurse surnamed Jiang at the hospital and quickly developed an extramarital relationship with her. After tasting the sweetness of infidelity, he continued to have affairs with many other nurses and interns. These mistresses, besides being young, beautiful, and having attractive figures, more importantly made him feel adored. Actually, Gu Su wasn't completely unaware of her husband's infidelity. Once, Xiao Chang had brought his mistress home to fool around and was even caught red-handed by his wife. Afterward, he explained that it was just a patient or a pharmaceutical company representative who came to introduce medications. Usually, when Xiao Chang texted his mistresses, he always appeared very secretive. Therefore, Gu Su also vaguely sensed that something was wrong. But perhaps for the sake of face, she only told her sister about this and never mentioned it to her parents. Among his many mistresses, the one with the closest relationship to Xiao Chang was a doctor named Zhang Fan, who worked at a district-level hospital, and a nurse who worked at the same hospital as him. Of these, he loved Zhang Fan the most, but this woman kept pressuring him to get a divorce. Actually, deep down, Xiao Chang always thought this marriage absolutely could not end in divorce. Not because he still had feelings for Gu Su, but because the Gu family would definitely not let him off, and he would also be criticized by public opinion. Put bluntly, he didn't want to divorce because he feared losing his reputation and the benefits he had worked so hard to obtain. Therefore, on one hand, Xiaoqiang enjoyed the career benefits that his wife and her family provided, while on the other hand, he secretly planned a cruel scheme. In his thinking, if Gu Su suddenly died, then after a year or two, his understanding father-in-law surely wouldn't prevent him from remarrying. So Xiaoqiang began bringing anesthetic home every day after work, then mixing it into coffee or tea for his wife to drink. According to his plan, as long as he continued poisoning with small doses like this, eventually Gu Su would die from heart disease without anyone suspecting anything. This evil behavior continued for 2 whole years. However, his mistress Zhang Fan pressed him more and more urgently, saying that if he didn't divorce, they would break up. When everyone knew that Gu Su had started having heart problems over the past 2 years, on August 27th and September 5th, 2003, Xiaoqiang respectively put 3 doses of anesthetic into his wife's coffee. To create an alibi, after he finished preparing the coffee and gave it to his wife, telling her to drink it while it was still hot, he hurriedly left to be on duty at the hospital. After drinking the drugged coffee, Gu Su quickly became ill. In unbearable pain, she made 3 consecutive phone calls to her husband, but he still didn't come home. Having no choice, she called her father. When Mr. Si Rong frantically rushed to his daughter's house, he found that Xiaoqiang had already returned before him. He appeared very concerned, sitting beside his wife, but wasn't doing anything. Mr. Gu saw this and angrily said, "You're also a doctor. Why aren't you taking any measures? Just saying a few words, how is that going to relieve the pain?" Immediately after, he took his daughter to the hospital, but after examination, they still couldn't find the cause. Fortunately, Gu Su ultimately managed to pull through. After these 2 trials, Xiaoqiang felt the time was ripe. At this point, if Gu Su died from heart disease, surely no one would suspect anything anymore. Finally, on September 11th, while Gu Su was taking a bath, he put 5 doses of ketamine into the coffee, then handed it to his wife and gently said, "Su, after you finish drinking the coffee and eating the mooncakes, let's go outside for a walk and enjoy the moon." When Gu Su finished drinking the drugged coffee, about 10 minutes later, she began showing symptoms of dizziness, and her heartbeat gradually slowed. Then, Xiaoqiang helped his wife into the bedroom and laid her down, while he stood outside watching his wife struggle with death. In her agony, Gu Su called out her husband's name multiple times, but he coldly did not respond. According to Xiaoqiang's later confession, while waiting for his wife to die, he spent more than 2 minutes going to the kitchen to thoroughly wash the cup that had contained the drugged coffee. After Gu Su died, he even used that same cup to make coffee for himself to drink. This shows how strong his psychological fortitude was. Around 9:50 p.m., more than an hour after Gu Su had fallen ill, and noticing that his wife was about to die, only then did Xiaoqiang pick up the phone to call his parents-in-law and sister-in-law, saying that Gu Su's old illness had flared up again, and this time it was very serious. Gu Jing knew her sister had often felt dizzy over the past 2 years, but had never had a serious episode, so at that time she wasn't too worried. After making the calls, Xiaoqiang began calling for help from neighbors and took his wife to a nearby hospital for emergency treatment. At this time, Gu Su's parents were enjoying the moon at West Mountain, about 31 miles away. After receiving the call from their son-in-law, they rushed to the hospital. Unfortunately, they still didn't make it in time to see their daughter one last time. Although Mr. Si Rong ultimately couldn't save his daughter, fortunately, with his extensive experience and knowledge, he was able to ensure that the person who killed his daughter would pay the price. On January 2nd, 2004, the Suzhou Intermediate People's Court opened a trial to hear Xiaoqiang's case. He was convicted of intentional homicide and sentenced to death. But Xiaoqiang felt it was unjust and appealed. Finally, on June 22nd of the same year, the Jiangsu Provincial Higher People's Court issued its final verdict. The original sentence was upheld. Since the case occurred, those who knew Xiaoqiang were all extremely shocked after learning the truth. They thought he must be mentally disturbed. Beyond their surprise and confusion, everyone also felt a deep sense of fear. Behind a seemingly perfect person like Xiaoqiang, how could such a terrifying face be hidden? When a person is willing to sacrifice everything, including the love and life of their closest family members, just to achieve their selfish goals, They are not only losing their humanity, but also pushing themselves into an abyss with no way out. And that is today's case. Thank you for watching this video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next videos. See you in the next videos.